You need to do it, otherwise you can come on something like this.
Okay,
Not
okay.
student.
Right. That's right. You have to pay in some places. There, they pay very little. But in many communities around the world, it's actually quite expensive. And why do they make people pay? Shouldn't it be free for everybody to come and pray? Why do you have to pay to membership to get a seat in the Bet Knesset? Why?
They need money, maybe?
They need money. What do they need money for?
Pay the bills, electricity bills.
Electricity. Somebody has to clean.
Yes.
There's expenses of running a synagogue. Maybe one of the expenses is paying the reader of the Torah, the Baal Koreh, it's called in Hebrew, the reader, the master of reading, Baal Koreh. In any case, in some communities, that's not the custom. They don't ever ask for a membership fee. It's very nice, right? Anybody who wants is welcome. There's no reserved seats. You don't have to pay once a year any membership. So how do they make money?
Voluntary. People.
Some people give donations, it's true. There's another system of sort of asking for donations or getting donations. And this is a custom in many communities. And that is they auction off. Auction is they ask for bidding for various honors in the synagogue. You've probably seen it right over here in the Sephardi shul right next to us. Every Monday and Thursday, they before they read from the Torah, they say, who wants to pay for the honor of opening the ark, to take out the Torah? Someone says 5 shekels, someone says 10 shekels, and then they say, okay, the highest bidder, he gets the honor of taking the Torah out. Then they say, well, Kohen, usually the Kohen gets. Levi, you have to be a Levi. But the third aliyah, the aliyah for Israel, most people are Israel. So who wants to bid to buy the honor of coming up, being called to the Torah for the third aliyah? And somebody says 5, 10 shekels. In some shuls, maybe they're richer. They'll say $10, $20, $50. Very little, but it adds up over time. And then Hagba, who gets the honor of lifting up the Torah. 5 shekels, 10 shekels, 20 shekels, 50 shekels, $50, $100. In some communities, that's the way they raise the funds to pay for the electricity, to pay for the cleaner, to pay for the other expenses. There's no membership, but every week they sort of ask for donations connected to the various honors. And I don't particularly like that custom, but
this is how they do it in Gilad.
Is that right?
Yes.
Every week.
Every week.
Every week.
Especially when we have these special holidays, like Rosh Chodesh, or when we have Rosh Hashanah,
right.
Yom Kippur,
right.
They pay a lot of money.
Yes.
It's not about 50 shekels.
No.
100 shekels. They start, most of the people, when they ask how much, what time?
Yeah.
Going up 11 shekel?
11 shekel, nice. Yeah, I've heard of people paying 10,000 shekels for reading of Maftir Yonah on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, it's a very special honor. It's associated with blessings. Whoever, has this honor is blessed himself. I don't like it because it's public, sort of. It can turn into showing off who has more money. What about somebody's poor? He doesn't ever get to read from the Torah. He doesn't get an honor. But I understand why. It does actually can show that people want to donate to the shul. It's a very beautiful thing. They're giving money as a donation. And it works in some synagogues better than others. But every shul has to decide, are they charging membership or maybe they're getting donations without either of these. Maybe you could just say, we need some donations for our synagogue. Please, everybody donate. Not connected to the honors, to the aliyot or anything. Yeah?
what we have in Kiradon, it's something I like it very much. Because we know some people don't have the money to buy it. And what we have almost every week, someone buy his coming up to the Bima, but he giving to other people.
Gives it to others. He pays the money, but somebody else is called. That's nice.
So beautiful.
That is nice, yes, yes. Many times, people who are more well off, they'll be paying more, and they recognize that they have the funds that others don't, and they don't need to open the ark every day, every other day. So
I
they
remember
tell
when
somebody
we had
else.
a fire in our apartment, and I came to on Shabbos to our shul, and I didn't buy anything, but someone buy it, and he gave it to me because of the fire.
Very nice, very nice.
Wow,
Nice honor, nice custom, yeah.
beautiful.
I'm sure at that point you said, give me the cash instead. In your mind, you said to yourself, I need to buy new things because everything was burnt. But the honor to come up to the Torah is worth more, yeah, for sure.
You are allowed as like non-Jew to take the Torah like this and you turn out?
It's a good question. It's a good question. I believe so. I don't see any prohibition. I know that many communities, they don't do that, but I don't think it's a problem. To be called up to the Torah is not allowed because you have to be part of the minyan to say the blessings, and but to lift up the Torah or to open up the ark or to take it out, I don't think there's any prohibition.
And also to hold it on Simchat Torah?
To hold it on Simchat Torah, there's nothing wrong with a non-Jew holding a Sefer Torah. But I think a lot of people are just not used to the question, and so they're afraid. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's forbidden, they don't know, and maybe the other rabbis can disagree with my opinion. They may say it's not appropriate.
And like you open, when they finish with the reading, and also before, you open the...
Hagba it's called. When you lift up the Torah for everybody to see the writing.
Yes, and you do like this. And you
Some people hold up their finger, yeah.
Yes.
I don't think it's a problem for a non-Jew to do that.
But you also do before the reading, before the whole Torah reading, you open the ark, you take the Torah, and you give it to the reader. The
Right.
Are you also allowed as non-Jew to do this?
Yeah, I do. I don't think there's a problem. But again, there's different rabbis with different opinions on this. In terms of opening up the Torah and showing it open to the community, here we usually find two different customs. The Ashkenazim do it after reading of the Torah. Sephardim do it before reading of the Torah. In some places they have Sephardim and Ashkenazim davening together, so they do it twice. Once before and once after. But it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, lifting up the Torah is very special practice. In the Ramban, one of the Rishonim, says it might even be a mitzvah. According to that Ramban, maybe it should be done by a Jew, but still, I don't see. It's very similar to they have the custom is in most places that until you actually convert, you don't wear tefillin. You can wear kippah, and you can wear tzitzit, but tefillin has a very special status. Because there are three holy objects in Judaism. What are the three holy objects? That the object itself is considered to be holy.
The Shema?
That's not an object. Shema?
No.
An object, a physical object. So the tefillin is one of them. The Sefer Torah is another one. And the third one is? Mezuzah. Excellent. All the things that are written by a scribe on the parchment, in a special holy manner, they're considered to be intrinsically holy, and so they have to be, you can't throw them out. Even when you're finished using them, they have to be buried. They have special holiness. So that's a custom that until you enter the holiness of the Jewish people, you shouldn't be wearing tefillin. Of course, usually the last few weeks before you're almost finished, you need to practice. You need to practice a little bit. But most places that's the custom. Some places they let somebody in a conversion program wear the tefillin from the very beginning. It's all different customs. It's not an absolute law. But the reason why the custom is there is because these objects are considered to be the only holy objects we have. More so than lulav and a shofar. Those are objects of mitzvah. There's a special category in halacha called objects of mitzvah or objects of kedusha, of holiness. Chaftzei kedusha, objects of holy, sacred objects. So those sacred objects, I can understand someone saying, well, if we don't, the custom is to not have somebody who's not Jewish wear tefillin, so maybe he shouldn't hold the Sefer Torah either. I can see the connection. I can see why those rabbis would say it would be inappropriate. But I haven't seen any, and it's never written anywhere. And I don't think we have to add customs that are not written. So I don't think that there's any prohibition. It's just a custom. The tefillin idea also, different customs. Yeah, it's not prohibited for a non-Jew to wear tefillin. And so people, if they had the custom to wear tefillin before they came to us, they can keep wearing the tefillin even though they're not converted yet. But that's my opinion. Yeah.
Is it also forbidden for a non-Jew to study Gemara?
That's a good question.
Again, please?
Is it forbidden for a non-Jew to study Gemara?
It's a question. The truth is there are statements in the Talmud which seem very clear that it might even be forbidden for a non-Jew to study any Torah. Torah is a sacred text of the Jewish people. It's an intimate covenant between the Jewish people and God. There's even a tradition that when the Greeks forced the rabbis to translate the Torah into Greek because they wanted to conquer all knowledge. There's a big value in the Greek philosophers' time. We should integrate all knowledge. So they forced the rabbis to translate the Torah into Greek. There's a tradition that this became a fast day. We were very sad about it. Very sad about it because the Torah is intimate. It's very close. When you have a love letter between you and your wife, you're not going to post it on the internet, I hope. You don't publish it in the newspaper, right? It's something very private. And so once you translate it, everybody can understand it everywhere. And so there is this idea that Torah should only be studied by Jews, not by non-Jews. So, what do we do with that? So there is, but there are counter statements in the Talmud where it says that if a non-Jew studies Torah and is a very wise scholar of Torah, he is of a greater stature than the Kohen Gadol. Greater than the Kohen Gadol. The highest, the holiest Jew in the world is the Kohen Gadol. And if a non-Jew studies Torah, he's higher than, he needs to be more respected than even the Kohen Gadol. Shows you how important Torah is. But that seems to indicate that a non-Jew is allowed to study Torah. Right? So it's not the first time, and it's not the last time that we find a contradiction in our sources. What do we do with that? So we have to resolve the contradiction. And there's a number of different ways to resolve the contradiction. The primary direction that makes sense is that it depends how you study Torah and why you study Torah. If you recognize the holiness of the Torah and you recognize that it is the brit, the covenant between the Jewish people and God, and you're interested in that and you respect that, and you want to be inspired by the Jewish Torah, then probably a non-Jew is allowed to study Torah because he's not trying to take it away from them. He's not trying to take away the Torah from the Jewish people. He's just trying to gain inspiration. And for sure, this is explicit, the Tosfot says that let's say you are converting. You're a non-Jew, but you've decided that you want to become Jewish. So, many poskim say, we have to teach them Torah. Otherwise, how are they going to know to be Jewish? When they do convert, they come out of the mikvah, they have to keep all the mitzvot right away. If we don't teach them beforehand, they won't know what to do. Maybe at one point in time, all the Jewish community kept the Torah and the mitzvot. And if you just join the community, you would learn do what everybody does. Nowadays, our communities are so mixed, and there's so many Jews who are not observant and don't know the mitzvot themselves. And so it's pretty consensus today that in order to convert, here we are, sitting with some people that are not yet Jewish, and we're studying Torah. Well, everybody here is either Jewish or committed to converting. And so that's why I allow myself to teach Torah. According to some rabbis, there are still limitations. Getting back to your question. Some rabbis say, well, you're allowed to teach the convert, the conversion candidate, you're allowed to teach him the written Torah, but not the oral Torah. You're allowed to teach him the practices of prayer, but not Gemara. Gemara is part of the oral Torah. That's already too intimate. That's a portion of Torah which you have to wait for somebody to be fully converted to teach him that Torah. So there are different opinions. We had here a teacher once who was his teachers taught him, it was very important to them, that conversion candidates can only be in class 1 and 2, level 1 and level 2, but not level 3 when they're learning Gemara. They shouldn't be in the level 3 of learning Gemara until they finish conversion, until they go to the mikvah. And but there are other rabbis. Not everybody agrees with that. The standard, I think, many poskim today say, if the student is ready intellectually, he's been studying so much Torah, and he's ready for more, ready for deeper understanding. It depends on his skill level, on his advancement, and his experience. And if he's ready for the next stage, which might be learning Gemara, as long as he's in the conversion process, we know that his end goal is to be Jewish. He can even study Gemara, because how could you be, somebody who's not Jewish greater than a Kohen Gadol? He must have maybe studied Gemara. I think we don't look too much at that restriction. If someone's committed to converting and he's in a process, you can teach him everything, whatever he's ready for, whatever is appropriate for his level of scholarship, or his level of understanding. Some people, for some whatever reason, their full conversion gets delayed for bureaucracy reasons. They don't have the papers, but intellectually and spiritually they're ready. So I don't see a reason to hold them back. We have had people that are not yet Jewish. Actually, I think we do have today. We have in the beginner's Gemara class, we have people that are not yet Jewish, that are still in the process. And they're in the beginner's Gemara class.
Interesting.
Okay, so different opinions, yeah.
So, right, it's about the intention I have to give an answer, to read Torah or Gemara, all this.
It's very important. If you're not Jewish, the intention, it seems to be also clear in the Rambam. The Rambam says, it's in the 8th chapter, I believe, of the Book of Kings, Maimonides, right? His code of Jewish law, classic, written 1,200 years ago, amazing. Year 1200, 800 years ago, excuse me. He writes there in the same chapter, is 2 halachot, just 2 paragraphs, one from each other. In one it says, a non-Jew who keeps Shabbat is liable for death. We don't put him to death, don't worry. But it's considered to be something that's a sin. If you're not Jewish, you shouldn't keep Shabbat. And then, just 2 paragraphs later, he says, if a non-Jew, he says a ben Noach actually, if he takes upon himself mitzvot, that's fine. As long as he takes upon himself the mitzvot, he can keep more and more mitzvot. So what's the difference? Some people say the difference is Shabbat is special. Some people say it depends if you're just a non-Jew or if you're a ben Noach, a Noachide. Like you've heard of Rabbi Uri Sherki, a teacher here in Machon Meir. He has an organization called Brit Olam for Noachites. I mentioned it the other day, and there they make this distinction. He said, what is a Noachite? Somebody who recognizes the God of the Jewish people as the one true God, and the Jewish people as the chosen nation, but they themselves are not Jewish. But they want to do what they're supposed to do as a non-Jew. So that's what the Rambam meant, that's what Maimonides meant when he said they can take on additional mitzvot, and even the mitzvah of Shabbat. A non-Jew, as long as he's not doing it in order to create a different religion. That's what the Rambam wrote there at the beginning when he said a non-Jew who keeps Shabbat is liable to death. And the continuation of his sentence was, you're not supposed to create a new religion. Right? Non-Jews keeping Shabbat just doesn't go together. You can't create your own religion. You're Jewish or you're not Jewish. Jews keep Shabbat. Non-Jews don't. And if you're a non-Jew and you're keeping Shabbat, it must mean that, usually means that you're trying to create a new religion. Like what do we have in the Christian Seventh-day Adventists, right? They're non-Jewish. But they believe in Jesus. It's a different religion. They're liable, according to the Rambam, they're liable for death. They're going to be judged because they shouldn't be misappropriating, taking, without permission, the special, just like we said before, the Torah is an intimate bond between God and the Jewish people, so is Shabbat. Ot hi beini uvein bnei Yisrael. Ot hi leolam. It's a special sign between God and the Jewish people, not the non-Jews. So, however, so it depends on your intention, right? So if your intention is to create your own religion, so you're going to pick and choose, and I'm going to make my own religion, and I'll worship a different God, and I'll use the Shabbat, that's a big problem. But if you are intending to join the Jewish people, and that's why you're keeping Shabbat, or you know you're not Jewish, but you want to be close to the Jewish people, and you want to, keep some of the mitzvot, there is justification for that in our sources. And a similar question, which I'll just say it before you ask it. Many people have heard this, that even somebody who's a candidate for conversion, he should always, every Shabbat, make sure to violate the Shabbat. Of course, you're training to keep Shabbat every week, but until you go to the mikvah, you're not allowed to keep Shabbat. So there's some rabbis, the simple, it does say in the Talmud that a non-Jew who keeps Shabbat is liable for death. Dangerous business, right? But there are many poskim who have said, if somebody's a conversion candidate, he's not doing it to create a different religion. He's doing it because he's training. And therefore, you don't have to tell the non-Jew, the conversion candidate, you don't have to tell him to, turn on the lights once every Shabbat. There's other reasons why we don't. I think I mentioned it to you, Stephen. We talked about this. Maybe someone else. The laws of Shabbat are quite complicated and quite strict. Chances are, even if you're while you're in the process of learning about Shabbat, you're probably violating the Shabbat anyways. Also, there's the timing question. The Jewish time, the night comes before the day. We have the Kiddush Friday night, and then the day continues, and then it ends with the following night. But the Talmud tells us that for non-Jews, it's what we're used to. The night follows the day. And so, when you make Havdalah, if you're keeping Shabbat, you make Havdalah, you light the candle, and then you drive, and then you use electricity. If you're not Jewish, It's a violation of Shabbat. Because it still should be Shabbat if you're not Jewish. If you're not Jewish, the night should follow the day. So Shabbat doesn't end when it gets dark. And so everybody who's not officially Jewish, if they're in a conversion program, I'm not careful to tell them to violate the Shabbat. Some people find it offensive. I think it's maybe not educational. Maybe it's a hard pill to swallow for many people. They so much want to be Jewish. They so much want to keep the Shabbat. For me to tell them to violate the Shabbat very much is hard for them. So I rely on those opinions that say, for the three reasons I just mentioned, the timing issue, the difficulty of knowing all the laws of Shabbat, and the reading of the Rambam, that it's only prohibited to keep the Shabbat if you're creating your own religion. But if you're trying to be Jewish, it's fine. And so that's why we're not careful about telling everybody in a conversion process, every Shabbat, make sure you break the Shabbat. The opposite, we try to teach you to keep the Shabbat as much as possible, learn more and learn more, so that you're ready when you actually go to the mikveh, you'll be ready to keep the Shabbat in the best way possible. Yeah.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, just, it's a dogma. I'm a Christian, maybe I'm a Muslim. I can read the Torah and all the books of the Jewish religion. I can come to the Knesset to join the people when they have the service. That's right? So my question actually is, now I'm a Jew. Is it okay for me to read the Bible of the Christian? Is it okay to come to a church when they have the service? How it's about the scene of the Muslim? Can I read the Quran? Because I'm Jewish.
Right.
What do you say about that?
So I don't care what they say about it. What do we say about that? Is the question. Is halachically, is it permitted? Like we said before, now the Torah has been translated to Greek, and then it's been translated to English and French and German. Everybody reads from the Torah. And what matters is the intention. If you're trying to attack the Torah, of course it's a bad thing. But if you're trying to get inspiration from the true God, from Hashem, it's a good thing to read from the Torah. If somebody's a devout Christian and devout Muslim, they're not asking me what to do, but they shouldn't be. If they don't believe in the Torah, then it's not good that they're reading it. But that they don't ask me. But they can, and if they want to come to shul, and they like tourists, you see them at the Kotel every day and night. They come to look. It's a cultural event. It's interesting. We can't stop them. Is it good? No, not great. I would rather have my prayers intimately, but just between the Jewish people and Hashem. If someone is a believer, like a Noachide, then he can come but somebody who doesn't believe in what you're doing, it's usually disturbing. But we want to be nice to people. We want them to like us, so we allow them to watch and to enter. They have to be respectful. Maybe put on a kippah. Maybe they cover their sleeves if they're not dressed properly for a holy place. But right in the Western society, we have to have an open door, and I don't want people to be upset at us. So, but it's not great that they come and participate. Now, that's one question. What we've been talking about up till now, non-Jews, participating and reading from the Torah and joining us. Said there's maybe three stages. There's non-Jews who are believers in another religion. Then there are Noachites, who are non-Jews who believe in the Torah. And then there are people that are actually converting on the stage to becoming Jewish. And then there's Jews, right? So I guess 4 levels. Now you're asking me another question. Now what about a Jew? A Jew, for the Jew, is a Jew allowed to study other texts? So it depends what the text is. A Jew should only involve himself with important things. Studying Torah is a good thing to study. Why would you want to study something else? Well, there are other things. You study science, you study math, you study philosophy. It adds to your understanding of the world. So in this philosophy class, they bring the New Testament. That's a Christian book. Are you allowed to study the Christian books? They bring the Quran as wisdom from the Quran, wisdom from the Muslim scholars. Are you allowed to study that? A Jew is, so if you think that it's going to be valuable for you for some reason, because maybe you can, there's something called in the university comparative religion. You compare this religion, that religion, and you get a wider perspective. You can understand what each one believes. It's not the best way to study Torah, but sometimes you need a perspective. Sometimes it could be useful to understand the world around you. There are 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. What do they believe? What do they read? It's very interesting to know what you're up against. We had here a student not long ago who almost was baptized. Jewish. He was born Jew. But he fell into the wrong group of friends. And they were all Christians or believers in Jesus. And luckily, we stopped him. We got him before he came to Machon Meir, before he lost or went out of the faith. And, we tried to help him. So the question is, how bad is this? This is what Ravid is asking. How bad is it to study the religious texts of other religions? So it really depends on what is the status of the other religions. We know that the Torah is filled with a very, very strong language, many, many times, big prohibitions against idol worship. Most of the world today already doesn't worship idols. It does exist in some parts of the world more. In India, right? People have these little Buddhas, statues that they pray to. And the truth is, in some Christian groups, most Christian groups, they pray to the cross. The cross is like an idol. There's so many different types of Christians. And some Christian groups don't even put a cross in their church. Unitarian, it's called. It's an American church. All the Jews in America who wanted to assimilate to get up in society, but they couldn't bring themselves to go to a regular church, so they joined the Unitarian church. Because they could go, but there was no crosses. They felt that was easier. The truth is, so how to treat Christianity? Is it considered to be idol worship? Then it's avodah zarah. Avodah zarah, terrible, terrible sin. We know that's one of the 3 biggest sins there are, to worship another god. You have to give up your life. And in some cases, the halacha is very clear. If you have to save your life because someone's chasing after you with a gun, and the only place where you're going to get saved is in a church, some rabbi said, don't go in. You have to give up your life and not enter a church, because a church is a house of idol worship. So it's more complicated because there's so many groups of Christianity. Not all of them believe exactly the same way, regarding idols. But for a Jew, and then there's of course many, many Christians who don't really believe what they say in church. They just keep going with what whatever their parents did, they do, but they don't believe in God. They don't believe in anything. Unfortunately, there's Jews like that too, but there are Christians like that. And for many, many years, Jews lived in Christian countries. In Europe, very Christian. And there's a law, it says in the Talmud, on the day that is a Christian, a pagan holiday, you're not allowed to do business with the pagan. Why? Because the money that you give him, even though you're buying some products, he's going to go take it and give it to his God. So you're aiding and abetting idol worship. And the big question came is, here we are every Sunday. We're in the Christian world. Are we not allowed to do business with the Christians on Sunday? Even the day before Sunday, or the day before, if you know that the Christian's going to use the money that you give him for his worship, for his church, maybe you're not allowed to do business. The Jews, if that would be the halacha, they would really starve to death in the Christian countries. There was no other way. So rabbis had to be very lenient about this law and say, well, most Christians don't believe in it anyways. They're just following the customs of their fathers, and maybe Christianity. For the Christians, it's not considered to be pagan for them. Really, they believe in God and Jesus. So that's called worship of idol together with the true God, which is forbidden, of course, for a Jew. But for non-Jews, it's not so bad. For what they made all sorts of leniencies because we had to. So for many, many, many hundreds of years now, we don't really apply all those laws of the rules against idol worship, against pagans, to Christianity. Still, I don't go into churches. If I have a choice, and I have a choice, Baruch Hashem, I don't have anybody running after me with a gun to my head, forcing me to go to a church. And unfortunately, though, I've been asked by a tour guide, somebody whose profession is here in the land of Israel. As part of the tours are show the people that come to Israel, they're Christians. They want to see the Church of the Nativity. They want to go to Bethlehem. They want to see the churches. And there's, the tour guide's supposed to show them this picture, this artifact. Am I allowed to? I said no. Very, very difficult. Because it's hurting his income, his livelihood. But there are perhaps some rabbis on the fringes of Orthodoxy that would say it might be allowed. But so in any case, so to read a Christian book, I go back to your question, Ravid, to read the New Testament, quite problematic, because it's full of idol worship, right? It's all talking about worshiping Jesus, and he's a foreign god. So there might be permission for somebody who is studying it in order to combat, to fight, like Tovia Zinger is a famous guy people know about, that he fights against the missionaries and so forth. But it's not so simple. But in order to, if it's in the right context, there's room for leniency. In some places, the Quran, the Muslim text, most halachic poskim, the Saisors, they have decided that Islam is not considered to be idol worship. They have a different prophet. Instead of Moshe, who's their prophet? Muhammad. But they only believe in one God. They're also monotheists. And so there's a rabbi that was the rabbi of a town I live in, and he famously tried to break down the barriers, tried to make peace with the Arabs. And when one time, he tells the story, he went to have dialogue with the Arabs, and the Arab driver who was taking him there, he saw that there was a big demonstration of Islamic fanatics saying all sorts of crazy chanting, like kill the Jews. And now he was stuck in the middle of this. He was afraid that this rabbi is going to get killed. The rabbi said, don't worry. He gets out of the cab and he starts to scream at the top of his lungs, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, like them. Because what does Allahu Akbar mean? God is great. God is great. I believe God is great. If there's only one God, we're believing in a guy with a white beard and a kippah, and he's saying Allahu Akbar, and it won them over. It broke down the barriers, and they didn't kill him, Baruch Hashem. He made it out. And so reading from the Quran, if you have a good reason to, I don't think there's any prohibition. Of course, they messed, they're very recent. They're a young little offshoot of Judaism in many ways, right? 700 years later, the Quran, Islam came only 700 years after Christianity, and of course Judaism. But if you have a good reason, it's easier to allow you to read the Quran than it is to allow you to read the New Testament. New Testament, you're getting into trouble of, is it considered idol worship or not? Is it considered?
But I think it's very confusing. Let's put it this way. I want to give 3 examples. What I heard is, for me as a Jew, it's not allowed to bury a Christian.
To bury?
Yes. So the day the Christian will be buried, and for me as a Jew, it's not allowed to be there. This is what I heard. I also heard it's not allowed for, let's say, a Christian to come inside of a sukkah.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we know when we talk about Yerushalayim, in our Torah, the name of Jerusalem is called 600 times. And when we look in the Quran, 0. Nothing. Not only one time we read the name of Jerusalem in the Quran.
Okay.
So how can I know this? I need to read the Quran.
Right.
So this is making me...
So there's a lot, it's confusing. There's a lot of, we're trying to break it down now, try to give it some context. So, every person was created in the image of God. We just read Bereshit not too long ago, right? And so we have to treat every human being with respect. And when a human being dies, the way to respect him, to respect the dead, is to bury him, put him in the ground. What you might have heard is, the problem is that when you bury, most communities have some ritual. You don't just put him in the ground. Right. If the ritual is a Christian ritual, so then it's already a service of Avodah Zarah. It may be considered Avodah Zarah. It's like going into a Christian service. That's the problem. But there's nothing problem with burying a non-Jew. Burying a non-Jew is a good thing to do, because you have to show respect to every human being. And we shouldn't disrespect the body just because they're not Jewish. So it's okay to bury a non-Jew. The problem is what rituals they're going to be doing there. If they're going to be doing Christian rituals, so then you shouldn't participate in that. That is very problematic. Okay, same thing.
That's why we shouldn't go to the Christian funeral.
Correct, right? Christian funeral. It's a religious service. It's like a church service, even though you're not in the church. But you can go before, you can go after, you can go to the family, you could pay your respects. Just you should try to avoid the religious part of the service. It's a big problem to participate.
Especially for the people who are converting now, and they have family, they are not Jewish, not in the process.
Sure.
And the day when they need to bury them, let's say that it's a Christian, and the priest is coming and he do things. We need to stay away, so we cannot go to our brother, our sister, our father, whatever.
Right, unless you can convince them to not have a priest. Which is hard. But you can come before, you can come after, you can explain. They don't come to Christian ritual, religious services. Hopefully they'll understand. But same thing with marriages. Not only deaths. Right. If your brother gets married, your sister gets married, they're Christians. And you're a Jew. So if it's in a church, you can't go. It's very problematic. Depends, you can go to the party afterwards, not to the ritual. Yeah. But it's difficult. It's difficult. Maybe you can go and stand outside the church, but you can't participate in a Christian ritual. It's a problem. But you're right, there's a difference though between Islam and the Quran and Christianity. It's a little bit more complicated because there's a variety of opinions, even about Christianity that I was telling you about, doing business with them on Sundays, and not in all circumstances do we say, Christian, Avodah Zarah. It's not a one-to-one 100% always equation, but the general approach is you have to be much more careful with Christianity than you do with Islam because of the idol worship. Yeah.
Yeah, because I also heard that the Rambam, I don't know if it's true, but I heard it, and I didn't read it in myself own eyes, but I heard that the Rambam say that, it's not allowed to pray in the church, but it's allowed for a Jew to pray in the mosque.
Right, that's why. That's based. My words have been based on this Rambam's distinction. He's very clear with that distinction that Islam is not. They're monotheists. They're not worshiping a foreign god, and so obviously we pray as a Jew. So wherever you pray as a Jew, you're allowed to pray. So as long as it's not a house of idol worship, you're okay. Tov. Anyways, we got onto how we got from the 54 books of the Torah to. Well, we talked about Torah and Torah reading, and then you asked me about Gemara reading. It's his fault. Right. So the answer is you ask the rabbi who's in charge of that shul. If the rabbi of the shul says you're allowed to lift up the Torah, then I think he's right. There's one other calculation that sometimes the rabbi makes, and that is a very significant one. The danger is that if we allow a non-Jew to come and, let's say, open the ark, or lift up the Torah, or to hold the Torah, and he's wearing a kippah, then maybe somebody will think he's Jewish. If we allow him to wear tefillin, maybe somebody will think he's Jewish. And then, there's a woman up there in the women's section who's looking and says, I like that guy. He looks like very cute. And she'll try to marry him, but he's not Jewish. So we're worried about the mixing, that people would think he's Jewish when he's not Jewish, and it'll cause intermarriage, which is, of course, horrible thing for the Jewish people, assimilation. So there's other considerations other than the pure law that I was telling you now. That I think according to the pure halakha, there's no prohibition of a non-Jew touching or holding the Sefer Torah, or you have to know how to show it proper respect. Everybody has to show proper respect to the Torah. We never touch the parchment itself, for example. You may have seen that even if you need to. Right. There's the person who reads from the Torah. Usually, he also doesn't touch the parchment. He uses it's either called a yad, which is a hand, or an etzba, which is a finger. Sometimes it has it's like a piece of art in the shape of a finger, a pointer to help you point, because you don't want to be touching the parchment yourself.
Before with tzitzit, touch the word, then you touch.
That's right. If you want to kiss it, you kiss it with something else in your hand. You don't actually touch the parchment itself. Tzitzit is it's convenient. You have it right there. If you don't have tzitzit, so you can use any cloth. So we try not to touch the parchment itself.
But you need to have a talit.
Also, in some communities, you never go up to do anything public, to be a chazan, to anything that's communal representation. You have to be wearing a talit. This is the Ashkenazi custom. In the Sephardi customs, it's not so clear. Many times they'll have a chazan not wearing a talit. But in the Ashkenazi world, you always put on a talit before you do anything. Yeah. Yes?
Maybe I missed it. When I talk about the confusions, I also talk about the sukkah.
Yeah. Are you allowed to have a non-Jew enter the synagogue? So we said before, it's not ideal because, synagogue, again, it's an intimate place for Jewish worship. But there's no real prohibition necessarily. Unless he's wearing a cross or something like that. That could be problematic. Could be an idol. You don't want to have an idol. But if he's just a non-Jew, even if he's a believer in Christianity, so there's no real prohibition of him entering the space. Of course, we want to create holy space. As I said, holiness is intimacy between the Jewish people and Hashem. And so having a foreigner there sort of breaks the intimacy. And the sukkah is another example of a place which we try to invest with holiness. But there are circumstances where great rabbis have hosted non-Jews in their sukkah, even priests, even wearing the cross. They've hosted them in their sukkah. There's a very, very important principle. As I said, we lived in Christian countries for years and years and years, hundreds of years, and the important principle is that we have to get along. Because if we don't get along, they kill us. we learned the hard way that it's very important to keep good relations and to have peaceful communication, and having visits, friendly visits of one and the other's houses and the houses of worship is part of the way that's done. And so in order to keep good relations, many rabbis are lenient about that, because technically they're not doing anything wrong. There's no prohibition of a non-Jew being in the synagogue or being in the sukkah. I can understand that it's offensive to your sensibilities, because the sukkah is supposed to be an intimate with only Jews. But, for example, if someone's in a conversion process, even if they're not Jewish, we try to welcome them as much as possible. And there's other details, but we won't get into it now. I want to maybe wrap up this part of the conversation.
Rabbi told me,
yes,
because my mother, she was Jewish, but my father, he was not a Jew.
Right.
So when my daughter is coming to visit me in Israel on Sukkot, she couldn't come inside of the Sukkah. This is what this rabbi told me.
You should have asked a different rabbi.
I like that.
I think sometimes you have to understand the context. It's your child. How could you say such a thing? There's no law that you're violating by having your non-Jewish child coming into the sukkah. And of course you want to show her love, and you still love her. I think that some people don't have the full perspective of understanding the context. If you're not used to dealing with non-Jews, and all you do is read in the books, you think non-Jews have horns. Some non-Jews think Jews have horns. Right? But non-Jews are people too, and they have feelings, and you have to be very careful not to hurt their feelings, especially if they're family members. And so we have to find all the leniencies possible, not in these complicated situations. Somebody who has more experience with people who are converting, or people who are living in between these worlds, that's probably a better person to ask than somebody who's never even had a conversation with a non-Jew, who's never met a non-Jew in his life, somebody who's been totally, he's read about non-Jews in his books, but he's never actually had experience with them. Sometimes they can get it wrong. And I think that's a wrong psak. I don't think that's correct. Okay? All right, let's go back to our books of Hilchot Tefillah, laws of prayer. But the questions are good. It's good to ask questions. It's not off topic. This is part of what we're doing here. We talked about preparing for prayer. We talked about...
Rabbi, I got a question regarding just now you said the timing. We are still, the non-Jews still breaking the Shabbat.
Some rabbis tell the converts before they're Jewish, they have to break the Shabbat.
Yes, but we are still, we try to do as much as possible, and we do Shabbat Friday night, but we are not breaking the Shabbat, isn't it? How is it you are saying that we are still breaking the Shabbat?
On Motzei Shabbat, after the Shabbat is over.
Okay,
Motzei Shabbat, right? That's why. You're breaking the Shabbat if you do melacha after dark. You understand? Okay, good. So we're going to look at now chapter 6. We talked a little bit about preparations. We talked about having the area clean from any bad smells. Remember that? And you know what? I'll say one more thing about chapter 5. There's a few more laws in chapter 5. We talked about being ready emotionally. People would meditate before prayers. We talked about, there's one other law that you should know, that you're supposed to wash your hands. I'm looking at page 62 now. Chapter 5, section 2 in the laws of prayer. Washing one's hands. A person who prays must be in a state of purity. It is therefore a mitzvah to wash one's hands before engaging in prayer. Okay? If you know your hands are dirty for sure, you must wash your hands first. You must do that.
Only wash your hands.
Good question. Do you have to use a cup?
No.
Or should you use water and soap? Cleanliness? Is it an issue of cleanliness? Or is it a ritual? So the answer is that it's cleanliness, for the most part. Therefore, if your hands are not dirty, then you may not have to wash. But it's also that there's an element of the ritual washing as well. So many people, when they wash their hands before praying, they do use a vessel. But the main thing is that you should make sure your hands are clean. And if you have no water, as long as your hands are clean, some people say, rub your hands on your shirt, now your hands are clean. If you have no water, that's good enough. Okay, but ideally you should be washing your hands, and even with a vessel, because that adds a little bit of a ritual to the washing of the hands. But if you don't have a vessel, just rinse your hands under the sink, under the tap in the sink, and you're okay to go. Okay. By the way, it says also here, after going to the bathroom, you must wash your hands. And primarily it's an issue of cleanliness. So you don't have to use a vessel like you do for bread, washing the hands. And there's no bracha usually al netilat yadayim. Some poskim, the Gra, for example, says you have to recite a bracha when you wash your hands before davening, before tefillah. But most poskim say no. You only recite a bracha once in the morning, on netilat yadayim, and then if you wash your hands for bread. All the other times you wash your hands, even when you come out of the bathroom, if you wash your hands using a vessel, you don't have to, but many customs are that you should. You don't make a bracha al netilat yadayim. You have another bracha when you come out. What's the bracha when you come out of the bathroom? Asher yatzal, exactly. Okay. Whenever you're learning Torah, by the way, you should be careful not to touch any place that has sweat or that's considered to be dirty. You can assume it's dirty. Your private parts, you shouldn't be touching them. If you see somebody and he's learning Torah and then he scratches his head like this, he has to go wash his hands. Because we assume that the scalp is oily and sweaty, your underarms. You have to wash your hands before you learn Torah. Don't go crazy. Sometimes if you're in the middle of the class, just you realize, I scratched my head by accident. Sometimes you can be lenient because it'll be too disruptive. So you just wipe them off without water. But ideally, if you touch any of their private parts, you wash your hands with water. That's the proper respect for holy things. Holy things include prayer and studying of Torah. So you always have to be aware where your hands are.
So during the summer when it's very hot, I'm going to the Knesset and I'm ready to read Torah, and someone is coming in and to shake my hands, and he's very sweaty. Before I'm going to read, I need to go back to wash my hands, right?
We learned a lot from Corona. You know what you do with such a person?
Give her a hand.
Or the fist bump, or something like that. Or you wave. But you shouldn't be, if you touch sweaty stuff, you have to wash your hands. Yeah. Okay. Next, kippah and belts. You may have seen, it says here, person must, why don't you read it, Michael? Page 63 at the bottom. It's section 3 in chapter 5.
A person must prepare himself for prayer, feel awe towards God's majesty and glory, and be happy that he is about to stand before the King of Kings in prayer. He should also be apparent in his dress. One's clothes should be respectable, fitting for one who stands before the king. Men are obligated to cover their heads while praying, while reciting the name of heaven, and before entering a synagogue. However, in practice based on the custom accepted in Yahudut, men are careful to wear a kippah, also known as a yarmulke, all day long, according to the Shulchan Aruch. In any case, the obligation to wear a kippah while praying, when reciting God's name, and while in a synagogue is greater, for it is rooted in law and not just in custom.
Okay, so a kippah is not a mitzvah from the Torah, and it's not a mitzvah from the rabbis. It's a custom. It's a stronger custom when you're studying Torah or when you're entering the synagogue, but it's still a custom.
Like you said last week, I can go inside of the synagogue without a kippah.
I said that?
Yes. Because it's a custom. It's not a law.
Yeah, but we try to keep our customs. It doesn't mean that we don't do it just because it's a custom. I hope he didn't misunderstand.
But because I asked you, when somebody is coming inside in the synagogue, you remember, a new one, and he don't have talit on Shabbos, and also maybe he don't have a kippah.
Right.
How do I need to respond?
Right. So those are additional matters. Ideally, you should wear a kippah. But the situation you described is that we had two conflicting values. One is embarrassing him, and one is wearing a kippah. And we said embarrassing somebody is much worse than not wearing a kippah. Not wearing a kippah is violating the custom. We don't want to violate the customs. It's not something we do on purpose. But if it happens, you have to be careful not to violate a worse law of embarrassing somebody. That's what we were saying. It's not that you don't have to wear a kippah. You have to wear it, but the level of obligation is not the highest level of an obligation. It's a level of custom, which is very important custom. Very important custom. Yeah.
Question. I always, every morning, and then after I wake up, before I wake up, the keeper beside, I should moderately or moderately, because the hand didn't
wash yet.
Yeah.
Right.
This is also my question. Is it moderately or moderately?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know what's special about Modeh is that it's the first thing you say when you wake up, right?
Yeah.
And usually, what did we just say? You're not allowed to pray unless you wash your hands first. So how can you say Modeh before you wash your hands? So the answer is because Modeh, if you notice, does not have the name of God.
So you can say
We say lefanecha, Modeh lefanecha. I give my thanks to you. Melech chai v'kayam, the living and the existing God. Thank you for giving me back my soul with great compassion. So this is a beautiful thanksgiving to Hashem, but you don't say His name. And so that's why we say you're allowed to say it without washing your hands. And probably that means that you're allowed to say it without wearing a kippah either. But I think the custom of most people is to actually put their kippah on. I'm not sure, but I think most people put their kippah on first Even though you're right, you're really not supposed to touch anything before you wash your hands. And even your clothing, you shouldn't touch before you wash your hands. Well, I think the common custom is that you put on your kippah to say Modani. Just because how can I say a praise to Hashem without wearing my kippah? We're so used to it. Some people sleep in their kippah. They have a special hat, a sleeping cap. But you don't have to. Of course, it falls off, it's disturbing. Most people sleep without a kippah. Lo tzarich. Tzitzit also, you don't have to. When you're sleeping, it's nighttime. You don't have to have tzitzit at all at nighttime. But there's some people that, they're very, very pious. They don't want to be for one moment without a kippah. But most people, they take the kippah off, go to sleep. In the morning, they put it on. I think most people put it on before Modani. But I don't think it's absolutely obligation. Because, as I said, it doesn't have the name of Hashem. You're saying Modani even before you wash your hands. And then, it's an interesting question.
Some people they put the before sleeping, put the water.
A water basin with a cup right next to the bed. That's right. We're going to get up to this. I wonder if it's in this chapter. I think it should be. Maybe it's in another chapter about the morning blessings. Yeah, it's probably there. Yeah. It's chapter 8. Chapter 8, we're going to talk about washing the hands in the morning.
No?
And chapter 7 is about waking up. Probably the laws of Modani are there too. I wonder if he answers those questions in chapter 7 and chapter 8. I'm sure he talks about the custom of washing with your hands right next to the bed. That's for sure in chapter 8. So we'll get there. And why people do that. But let's focus on chapter 5 for now, and we'll answer that question when we get there, okay? So in chapter 5, we talked about the kippah, putting on the kippah, and I think most people put it on first thing, maybe even before Modani. Okay? Now there's another custom which we're going to talk about more tomorrow, and that you've seen probably. Some people put on a special belt.
I have also the black belt.
You have it? What's it called?
I don't know.
It's Yiddish. Galtel. Giltel? Giltel. Sorry. In Yiddish, most people say gartel. Gartel. It means belt, right? It's a belt. And we'll see why they wear this special belt for prayers, only for prayers. Yeah. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. It's here on page 64. We'll continue with Hashem tomorrow. Okay? Shavua tov. Shavua tov. מצוין.